Okay, so this is a fun little part. It's called the Sarrus wheel guard, and it's designed to actually protect the wheel. So let's go ahead and take a look at the wheel itself. So the wheel's going to start here, and it's going to be 3 inches off the base of our base plate when we put this together. And that's going to be on the wheel mount. And then from there, it's got a 4-inch diameter, about 2-inch radius up here. And then with the ellipse feature in here, it's 3/4 of an inch in diameter, which means from that 2-inch radius, you might say, or the 4-inch diameter up here, it's going to be another 3/8 of an inch, so almost 2.4. So what we're going to be doing here with this sketch is we're going to be going over here from the very center of where the pin is on the wheel mount. We're going to go out 2 inches and add a little bit more on top of that, like maybe 1/4 of an inch, in order to get this radius up here that we're going to be using. And we're going to put all this geometry together. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and get back to our original model and take a look at this and try to get this going. So we're going to be sketching from the front plane. So typically what I do is I like to put in my reference geometry right away. And so we're going to put a center line here in the bottom. At the bottom of our front plane. When it's going through the origin, what plane is it going through? It's going through the top plane. Okay, so we're going to make that coincident. And this is going to be right on top of the top plane, so that it's 3/4 of an inch thick, our base plate. So we want to put another line in here that's just parallel to that. But before we do that, let's put in a big vertical line in here, so we can use that as a reference a little bit later. So we're going to take another line in here. We're going to make that horizontal. We're going to go ahead and select the midpoint, put that in that line, and we're going to provide a distance here of 3/4 of an inch. So what that does is it puts us right on top from the base down here, with the bottom of the base plate, to the top of the base plate. And that's what these two lines mean. So I'm going to stretch these lines out a little bit. Okay, so the next thing we want to put in is the very center of our wheel mount. So the wheel mount's going to be sitting up here. Remember, it kind of goes up a little bit and then comes up here to a point and it comes back down over here. And what we have in here is the pin that's concentric with the round that's on top of that wheel mount. So all we need to do is kind of like define that by yet, if you can imagine this, yet another center line. So we're going to put that in here. We're going to right click in that, midpoint. Another way of doing it is just try to find that midpoint if you can. There you go. You can click that point and that line and go ahead and make that coincident. That works too. So remember, this is going to be 3 inches from the top of the plate, so we're going to make that 3. And that puts that in place. So now we need to go ahead and put in that arc. And that arc, as I mentioned, is going to be 2.6 inches. And that provides us a little bit of room in there. So it covers the wheel, but doesn't allow the wheel to really scrape inside of that. So that's going to be our sweep path. And so we're going to go ahead and sketch that out. So we're going to put the center, we're going to do a 3-point arc, or, you know what, a center point arc is actually good, because we could actually click this as the center of that arc, swing that out until we get it approximately where we want to. So you look at the value next to the cursor, and then we can start there. We're going to start approximately here, sketch that out, go a little bit below the bottom. Now we have that in place. So the center point of that arc is already in the middle here, and it's already well defined, so we're okay with that. We need some additional reference geometry. We're going to go ahead and sketch a line from there to the center here too. Off at an angle, we're going to define that as being 20 degrees. While we're here, let's go ahead and put the radius on that. It's going to be 2.6. So we're actually pretty close. We're going to put another center line in here from the center over here to that. We're going to define this as being 10 inches. Not 10 inches, I'm sorry, 15 degrees. That's going to be 15 degrees. And then this one's going to be, we're going to exaggerate this a little bit just so we make sure we got that tangent relationship good. I don't think it'll automatically pick that up. So between that line and this arc, we're going to make that tangent. And then dimension on that line in order to get that blue endpoint of that line fully defined. We're going to put a value of 1.5. So when it does something like this, you can go up, you can go off to the side, or you can go make sure it's parallel to it. Parallel is what we want. If we want to lock in that parallel, right click on the mouse, and we're going to make that 1.5. So that's our sweep path. We're going to put a profile on that path and sweep it down that path. And it's going to include the arc and that line. Okay, so we have our path in place, and the profile and the path are related to each other. So now that we have our path in place, path usually comes before the profile, but it doesn't always. In this situation, it's going to have to. So what we need to do is we need a plane up here in order to put our profile on it. Now conceivably, if we rotate this around, we know that the front plane's in here. So actually the right plane. So the front plane is in the front, but the right plane is the plane that we can actually sketch our profile on. Then do the sweep down in this direction. But I don't think the sweep yet has the capability of being able to go bidirectionally, so we can't really tell it to go as far as that, maybe as far as this point down here, in two different directions. So we're going to have to insert our own plane in this. So let's do this. We're going to go ahead and click on this line and that point on that line, on that arc, and that point at the arc, and we're going to go ahead and put in a plane. What the plane is going to do is going to take at that point, and if it considers an extension of this arc as being a line up here, it's going to take that point and that extension of that arc as a line, and put a plane in there perpendicular to that line, that virtual line it's going to create. So if we go to Features, go over here to Reference Geometry. Well, we can't be in this sketch, so let's go ahead and rebuild this. We're going to take this point, that arc, Reference Geometry, and then we're going to go to Plane. It's going to put a plane in place. Don't necessarily have to, rename that plane, but we could. We can call that probably our profile plane. It's not going to be a very complicated part, so we don't necessarily have to label everything in this. And of course, our sketch one, we can just call that path if we want to do that, just to be consistent with everything else we've done. So now we have a profile plane. If we were to click on that plane, go normal to it. Let's go normal to it from the other direction. Now let's begin to sketch. So we're going to select that plane, go up here to Sketch, go to the Sketch button up here. You notice that what we have in here is going to be a projected origin. So the origin projects right in the middle of that, but you also notice if you turn this model over a little bit, that origin is actually also at the very end point of our profile, of our path. So when we put our profile on it, it's going to be right on that path if we consider that projected origin on it. The real origin is actually down here. And you know that if you were to click in the real origin over here in the Feature Manager, you can see that. So we'll stick with the projected origin for now. Let's go ahead and sketch this. So what we want to do is we want to sketch something that looks similar to this. So there's the origin. What we're going to do is we're going to sketch a line up 1.5 inches, sketch a line over 1 inch, an arc over here with a couple of center lines over here to help define that arc with that 60-degree angle. And then we're going to put a radius on that of 0.3 inches. Then we're going to put a fillet over here of 0.3 inches, but just to keep the amount of dimensions down, we're going to go ahead and make those two equal to each other. And then we're going to extrude it back and forth. We're going to do a bidirectional offset. And to avoid these complicated dimensions in here, we're not going to put dimensions in this time. We're going to put in our own dimensions and sketch relations to make that put that in the middle. So with that said, let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and click on this plane. Let's go to Sketch. Let's go ahead and sketch a line down 1.5 inches, this line over, and start putting some dimensions on this. They're both black, but the endpoints aren't. So that's going to be 1.5. This is going to be 1 inch. Let's turn that a little bit. Let's go ahead and put in a tangent arc from here to there, so it's going to be tangent. And we're going to put in a couple center lines in here. One's going to be an extension of that. We want to make sure that that's tangent. It picked up that tangent relationship. So I don't know if you saw that, but if you try that again, let's go up here to center line and click on the end point of that line. You'll notice that if you get that extension of that line right next to the cursor, it tells us that we're going to be picking up that tangent relationship. Saves a little bit of time. And then this line is going to go down. So we want to make sure that that's vertical. And then we're going to put a smart dimension between it. That's going to be 60 degrees. And this is going to be 0.3. So almost fully defined. We want to make sure we have that virtual sharp here at that origin, which we will if we put that fillet in last. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to put the fillet in, and we're just going to sketch this point over here, and then right click. Well, we're going to take that radius dimension, and let's go ahead and delete that. What we want to do is we want to make that equal over here. We don't want to have too many dimensions in here if we can make them equal to each other. And there we go. There's our sketch. There's the initial part of that sketch, and now we're going to offset it. So offset entities, we're going to make it, we're going to have to take that value and split it in half. So 0.05 is going to be the value. We don't want to add dimensions. We do want to make sure we select the chain. So when we select one line in here, it's going to select everything that's attached to it. And we want to make it bidirectional. So if you click on one element in here, it picks everything. And if you right click, go to the green check mark, there we have it. So we asked it not to put in dimensions, at least I thought we did, but here are the dimensions. So let's go ahead and take these dimensions out. Let's go ahead and click on those. or do the selection box around them. Since we have that plane in place, it's kind of conflicting here. Now let's go ahead and put in a model line between this point and this point. Let's take the end point, or the midpoint of that line, and this line over here, and we're going to make that doesn't like that midpoint. Let's see how we can define that a little bit better. So now we can do that. We can take the midpoint of this line and the end point down here. We should be able to make that coincident. There we go. That's what we're trying to do. So now if we put a dimension between that, and all we have to do is really dimension this line here. Do twice. Do escape twice, gets it out of that. I think it's considering an ordinate dimension. But we're going to make that point 1. So that should be fully defined. If we go down here, we need to do the same thing down here, or at least connect the endpoints down here. I think if we do that, that should be black and ready to go. Now let's take this line, right-click on that, select chain, and we're going to make that for construction. So that way it's disregarded when we create our solid feature. Okay, so now we have our path. You can see that in the background. We have our profile, and we're going to take that profile and sweep it along that path. Okay, the last and final step, we have two. We spent a lot, I call it complicated sketches, but really are sketches that took a little bit of time to put together. And we're going to now, we spent a couple minutes on the sketches, but only a couple seconds on what we're going to be doing with the feature. So we're going to go ahead and rebuild this, and with our sketch one, we're going to call that profile. And with two independent sketches, we can click on profile and path, and we're going to sketch it. So you notice that we have the path in the background at the virtual sharp of this intersection up here where we put that fillet in, and it's going to sweep it along that path. So if we go to features, Sweep Boss space, bang, got it in place, green check mark. So that was easy. The feature thing is easy. Sketches, a little bit harder. So I think the material, if we right click on that, we're going to go to edit material. It's a plastic. And this is going to take looks like it's going to take a moment. Let's not go to steels. Let's go to plastics. And somehow, I think I might be selecting the wrong one here, but we're going to go there to EPDM. We're going to apply and close. And this is a little bit translucent, but we could actually take this and open up our display options up here. And we're going to go ahead and click under appearances. And if we click inside of that, we're going to change the color from white to something else. I think I had a green. So let's go ahead and choose a green color, maybe a light green color, and go to the green check mark. So now we have something that looks a little bit different from the other models that we have in our other parts in regard to the Sarrus mechanism. Okay, now that we have our sweep in place, let's go ahead and put in our loft. But before we do this, let's go ahead and turn on our path sketch. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. We're going to make that show so we can get a little bit of perspective of what we might be doing here. We probably don't need this profile plane, so let's go ahead and hide that for now. So what we want to do, we already have our top plane. We can show that top plane by going up here and showing it. What we also want to do is we want to take that top plane and that line, select that with the control key, and create a new top plane called top plane number 1. That top plane number 1 is going to be the terminus of our wheel guard, our Sarrus wheel guard, because we don't want it to go into the the back plate or the bottom plate of our Sarrus mechanism, the base plate there. We want to make sure it just goes up to the top of the surface. So with those two items selected, if we go over here to features, go to reference geometry, we're going to go to plane, and it's thinking that we want to put a plane that's perpendicular to that top line. So we'll have to go over here to our properties manager and take a look at our options. So automatically it shows our line 3, which is pink. Over here the purple color, over here is the purple color. You can see our top plane over here. So down here is where you want to make the change. Instead of perpendicular, we want to make that parallel. And go to the green check mark, and now we're going to call that plane our top plane 1. So just put the word top in front of that just to help us guide us along in this. It doesn't necessarily need to be that big. So now we're going to go to our front plane, and we're going to do some sketching on it. So if we go to the front plane, we're going to go to sketch. We're going to go normal to the front plane. Let's go normal in the other direction. And now we want to put in an arc that goes from approximately that point down here to that line that's right on top of the front plane. Take that arc, that line, and we're going to make that tangent. And then we're going to do the same thing to the other side. So this one's going to be even more exaggerated. So we're going to go from there down here. Not going to make it tangent down here, although it's tempting. We're going to take that arc and that line. We're going to make that tangent up here, though. And now we're going to go to this image over here. We want to make sure that that's 1.5 inches from where that line is, where the projected origin is, and then 3/4 of an inch for the one in front. So let's go ahead and scoot this about a little bit. Let's go ahead and put a dimension in between that point and maybe this line here. We're going to make that 1.5 inches, right? And then this one's going to be 3/4 of an inch. So that stretches it out quite a bit, and that's our guide curve. So instead of sketch 1, we're going to call that guide. Okay, for a loft, along with the guide curves, we're going to need to have at least 2 profiles. So one profile is going to be over here, so we're going to go ahead and click on that. We're going to go to up to our sketch button up here. We have to make sure we click that because then we want to do convert entities. So now it takes all that, everything that was on that face up here, and converts it to line geometry. So it takes existing model geometry and turns it into sketch geometry. But we don't need all that. But what we do need is a line that goes across here, and then we're going to delete everything else. So with our trim tool, we're going to delete all that stuff over here. And now we have our first profile. Our second profile, we're going to go ahead and rebuild that. So we're going to call that profile 1. So our second profile is going to be on the bottom down here. So it's actually going to be on the top plane here. So if you click in that plane, we're going to go to sketch. We're going to go to corner rectangle. And we're going to go normal to that. We're going to go normal in this direction. What we want to do is we want to pick up where these guide curves are. So we're going to click one edge of the rectangle and kind of get close over here. And we're going to take this line over here. We're going to select the midpoint. And that end point of that guide curve, we're going to use the guide curve to help guide us here and help drive some of the geometry. And we're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to take this and that. We're going to make the end point of that line. We're going to make that, let's try that again. Selected too much stuff. Select the top plane up here. So let's try that again. That point, not the plane, but that point, that line, we're going to make that midpoint. So the distance here, the thickness here is going to be 1/10 of an inch. So if we just click on one of those faces, 0.1 will do it. And if we rebuild that, that's going to be our profile 2. So let's see what we're doing. You can kind of get an outline of, see a pretty good outline of what we're going to be creating with that loft. Okay, so now that we have our 2 profiles and our guidelines in place, let's go ahead and loft this guy. So we can actually pre-select it over here. It's a little bit easier to do that because, you know, everything's contained over here in the sketch. If you just jump over here to loft, now you can see what we're going to get. And that's not really quite desirable, although it gives us a yellow preview. Let's see what we're going to get with that. Yeah, it gives us a preview, but it's still not going to build it for us. So we have to take that guide point, maybe move that back over here. Try to move that back over here so it's right below this one. But yeah, it resolves it a little bit better there. But the guide curve is really going to help us put this in place. So let's go ahead and choose this guide curve. We're going to choose the open loop. Go to the green check mark. And then this guide curve over here, and we're going to go to open loop over here too, go to the green check mark, and now that puts it in place. So if we go to the green check mark over here for the feature, it's embedded into our part. So the loft, we did a loft with the guide curves. That's probably okay. We could have done the same thing as I mentioned before, just by simply clicking on its face and done a shape in here. Also using where those guide curves were and just extrude it back up to the surface back here would have done the same thing. But I wanted to show you how to use the loft in a different manner. And now we have our wheel guard in place and ready to go.